What's up, guys? Welcome. I'm just kidding. Welcome back to the channel. I want to talk about one of my favorite ways to ensure progress in our practicing. And that practice thing is the set list. Like a lot of cool practice things, it was introduced to me in a jazz context, but it's actually applicable for any genre. The concept is simple, where it's like, you're practicing scales, you're practicing arpeggios, and then like you go to the gig or whatever, you go to rehearsal, whatever, and you just want scales and arpeggios to suddenly become music, and usually it doesn't. If you've been practicing like this all day, and then you get to a solo part in an A minor song, and people are like, all right, time to solo, there's a good chance you might solo in the vocabulary of not exactly a musical solo, and not exactly a lot of the time what we had in mind, like, hey, I'm going to do all this practicing and I'm going to sound awesome, right? And then you kind of just sound like you're practicing, and it can be a little frustrating. The way around that is the set list, which I would say, you put at the end of your practice routine. You run all your scales, your, modes, your arpeggios, whatever, go through all your chords, and then you apply them musically to an entire set list at the end. So you're all warmed up, you're as, ready to go as you can be, and then you apply in that moment everything you've learned. What's also important is that you're kind of exposing yourself as the set list gets longer to different kind of scenarios that can happen. If, say, I'm a blues player and I just play a pretty standard 12-bar blues, and I practice everything around a standard 12-bar blues, major blues, and then I go to the jam and it's a minor blues, or a blues with a quick four, or a blues with its own kind of, the chorus is a blues, but the verse is something else, and I need to play blues style over a different chord progression, like, that could trip me up, obviously, because I'm just used to kind of this one thing, and I need to have a pretty open mind and open ear to everything that could possibly happen and how I'm going to approach it with confidence and, and do it well. Even if something is not covered in the set list, it doesn't really matter. Like, you've gone through enough variations, you've trained your ear enough, you've been able to adapt to enough scenarios that if one new one is thrown your way, it's not that big of an issue. So again, say I'm a blues player, etc., and I want to build a set list, I'm going to want to choose specific songs, not based on whether I really like them. What if I like 10 standard major blues songs? Like, that's not really helping me. That's not the point. I want to pick ones that I like, but also that have a specific progression or time signature or whatever that is challenging to me. So of blues progressions I'd want to include, one of them would be like, right? The 1 minor, flat 7, flat 6, flat 7. Another would be the old that kind of a thing. Another would be the old 1 minor to 4 dominant or 4 major. Another one that works with A minor or A major. I'll play both versions. So 1, flat 7, 4. Either 1 minor, flat 7, 4, flat 7 major, 4 major, or 1 major, flat 7 major, 4 major, 1. Another one that could be major or minor. Or minor. Then you might want to get into like a different kind of sounding blues, like Of course, you wouldn't want to be playing everything in the key of A major or A minor, or A blues. You'd have to start getting into different keys and everything like that. Different sorts of things, like, soloing over a general chord progression is a lot different than soloing over a riff, for instance. One is a lot more free rhythmically, and one is very specific rhythmically. So then soloing over something like... would all of a sudden become the next challenge. And so each one of those has its own challenges. Like anything involving A minor and D major, you're going to want to know your minor pentatonic, obviously, but also flavors of Dorian. And anything with A minor and F in it, you're going to want your flavors of Aeolian. So now you need to practice your modes, the arpeggios thereof, and then you need to apply them. So all of a sudden, these songs at the end of your set list are actually informing your entire practice routine. That helps me at least give context to like, why am I even practicing? Like, what am I practicing some of this stuff for? I think a lot of people probably go over augmented and diminished things a little less than they do everything else. And that sort of makes sense because there's less augmented and diminished things usually in people's gigs. If you wanted to make sure you had a good handle on them, you would put a song in the set list involving augmented and diminished, and you'd have a reason to go over them. And then you can kind of start to explore, but you'd have musical reasons. You'd have music guiding your practice routine. So again, the biggest pro of having a set list at the end is that it reminds you that at the end of the day, you're trying to play music. You're not trying to just play fast or correctly. You're just trying to like play music, get feelings across, get excitement across, get an experience across, or at least create an experience. One of the ways we accomplish that within each genre is to also, be aware of the cliches and the overall soloing language or melodic language of each genre. Country has its own, blues has its own, jazz has its own, etc. A lot of times students have come to me and been like, oh, I want to get some jazz in my playing. And I'll be like, what kind of jazz do you listen to? And they'll say, I don't know, I don't really listen to a lot of jazz. It happens most often with jazz, but it's a thing that happens. It's happened with blues, it's happened with country, etc., where people want to get some things into their playing and they just really want like 10 licks you need to know now, as opposed to getting familiar with that genre. As you can imagine, like, they'll sound good over the song they want to play, but there's not really like a deep understanding of that genre. It's not really seeping into their playing and informing their future decisions and like being a part of their musical growth. It's more like, hey, I need to sound country tomorrow and I just need to country stuff now. That is a totally valid approach. Like if I needed to jazz tomorrow and like that was going to be my paying gig and I didn't have a lot of jazz experience, it would be a good idea for me to learn some cliches immediately, just in case they wanted me to improv something over a different kind of song, or it would also be in my best interest to write out a solo over whatever song I'm playing tomorrow if I have that in advance. But it would also be more in my interest to go, okay, is this a gig now? Like, is this a thing I play now? Well, then I should probably get good at that genre. I should understand that genre. I should know how to fit in that genre. I should know how to create the vibe of that genre. So all of a sudden it doesn't become this thing that I go, I gotta fit in that thing. I gotta make that work. And go, oh, that genre again? Yeah, no problem. Let's play it. To be fair, that is a muscle you have to also continually work. Like there's bands that I used to play with where like I would sound pretty good with them then, and I think I'd have to like get back to it now. Like there's one band I played that almost like half the set list was above 200 BPM, and a lot of it in harmonic minor. And after a while, I got really good at shredding harmonic minor. Have I done that for years at this point? No. So, like, would it take me a sec? Yeah, I'd have to, grease those wheels or whatever. Thankfully, I wouldn't have to grease too much because there are a few songs from that band in my set list. They did get put in that set list because I did realize once, I tried to play through one of the songs and was like, this is not happening. Oh, right. I gotta keep working on that. And then I have. So not only is the set list useful for like chord progressions and modes and whatever, but it also is useful for vibes and just like different feels, different, this song is straight eights, this is swung eights, oh, this is kind of a shuffle, this is a jump blues, this is a whatever. All different kinds of demands of you, basically. So say you practice a little bit 7 days a week. Having this set list at the end of like 4 of those days will, I think, lead to a lot of improvement and a lot of like clear improvement. You'll see your own improvement because you'll hear yourself over those songs getting more comfortable. You'll feel more comfortable, and then hearing back, you'll be like, oh, that soloist, who happens to be you, sounds like they're fitting over that song more and more and more. And then, of course, you'll have some off days, but then you'll go, I know exactly why that was off now. Because yesterday was on, and today was off, and I can, I have recordings of each, which also is good to, do for practicing. Record yourself, listen back. And then you can go, oh, this was more comfortable, and it must be because of this. This was less comfortable, and it must be because of that. A couple things I would definitely recommend, on top of just like having a song in 3/4 and having a bunch of different chord progressions, would be having one song at least that's uncomfortably fast and another song that's uncomfortably slow, like 60 at the fastest, 60 BPM at the fastest, because especially after a mid-tempo or up-tempo song, going straight to a ballad live, you're like, it's like you almost ran a marathon or something, because people just casually breathe at the end of a marathon. But it's usually like you're out of breath and then you need to slow down suddenly. And having experience with that will really help you in that scenario. So you, and for that matter, the whole band, isn't just rushing through this ballad. Also, as far as the ballad goes, I think you'll end up being faced with one of the biggest maybe things to practice or maybe things to work on, which is if you don't love your guitar tone, for a solo on a ballad, it's just miserable. Like, if you're not really happy with the way your guitar sounds, holding half notes at 55 BPM, you're just going to be listening to this awful sound being held out with maybe a little bit more reverb. It'll affect you. And then you'll go, oh, I need to work on my tone, which is a good place to be because you have a road forward. Don't be discouraged about it, obviously. Like, it's like, oh, yeah, no, my tone sucks. 4 ballads. It's a really cool cutting tone for the fast song, but I need a full sound now for ballads. Now you have something else to practice. Now you have something else to feel comfortable with. Then also over the ballad, you learn to like play and then let space happen because you just kind of have to. There's a lot to learn, really important lessons that you won't get otherwise if you just play a bunch of songs that are at 130 BPM. A lot of people might be thinking like, hey, I don't really feel like soloing over other people. Like if I'm playing along to recordings and there's a solo section and I just start soloing over the other person, a lot of people might not want to do that. Therefore, iRealB and other like MIDI play along apps, that might be the road to go down. It is still quite important to play along with like the real thing with the recordings, even though if you're mainly playing rhythm, which is arguably more important than soloing anyway, because you're getting the kind of real feel, the real vibe of that genre, as opposed to like a MIDI approximation, which, will do a good approximation of like a rock shuffle or whatever, but it's not, different drummers' interpretations of rock shuffles or different bands' interpretations of rock shuffles. And, you're not learning a lot about music by playing along with a MIDI play along. If you have a rock shuffle for this week and another one for next week and another one for next week, after half a year of playing through different rock shuffles, you have a very strong musical knowledge of actual music, of whatever you practiced. So if you're at all curious about either my like Spotify play along playlist or my iRealB MIDI play along playlist, DM me on Instagram or reach out via Patreon. Link is in the description. And if you have any awesome songs that you're like, I learned a lot because of this song, please let me know in the comments. So I hope you have a lot of fun with this idea and that you see a lot of progress the same way I did when I added it to my practice routine. So thanks very much for watching, and thanks for dropping by the channel. We're excited about guitar.